Columbus, Indiana this morning to talk about our Old Testament passage as we prepare for the fourth and final week of Advent. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to 11 and verse 16. And so we're preparing for the fourth Sunday of Advent. And so we're taking this Sunday's lectionary passages. There's 4 passages for every Sunday on a 3-year cycle. And so we take Sunday's passages and we back them up. We read the Gospel on Monday, the New Testament on Tuesday, the Old Testament on Wednesday, and the Psalm on Thursday. And then on Friday, we prayerfully discover the themes and the threads that run through these passages, the intersection, and we believe that we find the truth in the center, the overlap of these 4 passages. And then on Sunday, we worship, and the sermon and the service and the music is all inspired by these passages. It's just an amazing way to prepare for worship. So today we're in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to 11 and verse 16. This is a very important passage in the Old Testament. It really is a promise of David from God of a dynasty, a house, a future. And it's a covenant made there in such a way that we see the promise of Jesus. It's really cool. So the way that I believe this passage is organized is really organized into 3 parts. The first 3 verses are David telling Nathan his plan and Nathan agreeing. The second section is God coming to Nathan and telling Nathan what he wants Nathan to tell David. And then that kind of third section, you can read it in this way, is Nathan telling David what God said. And then verse 16 is a little tag that talks about the promise of the dynasty of David. So a few things that stood out to me. In that first section, David told Nathan what he wants to do. He wants to build a temple for God, to put the Ark of the Covenant in a temple instead of a tent. David is residing and dwelling in peace in a palace, beautiful, lavish, made of cedars, which was expensive, and he wants God to have the same. And Nathan agrees. Nathan says, yeah, God's with you, let's do it. But the interesting thing is that Nathan is a prophet, and Nathan's job is to ask God what God desires. Nathan kind of just bypassed it and said, sure, King, let's do it. And so for a lot of scholars, they look at this as a political ploy, that the emphasis here for David was to build a real big temple in such a way that it would bring honor to David. I'm not really sure, but it's interesting to think about. They wanted to do what they wanted to do without consulting God. Now, the second part of that passage is that God revealed to Nathan what God wanted. And God denies the request for a temple. God said, I've never requested a temple. I'm perfectly content moving around with Israel, being portable in the tabernacle. God doesn't desire to be contained or boxed in. God desires to be movable. He moves where he wills. He leads, he guides. He tells them when and how to do what they're called to do to be part of his kingdom. God cannot be contained. And then the third section is this reveal to David from Nathan of what God said. And instead of David building God a house, God wants to build David a house. So it's a reverse. And by house, he's meaning a dynasty. In ancient times, that's what they referred to as a family line, a dynasty as a house of David, David's house, and that would be his family tree. And God promised that there would be rest and newness that would come through this family tree. And so in verse 16, it talks about that dynasty, the promise of that dynasty. And so this is a very interesting passage when you compare it to the Christmas passages and the birth of Christ, is that God doesn't want to be contained in a box. God wants to become part of, to dwell within, God with us, Emmanuel. God wants to be part of who we are, to be flesh and blood living amongst the people. And so we need to be reminded, as much as we have plans and we have things that we want to do, that we want God to be involved in, the real direction of this passage is that God is setting the course. It's his grace that leads and guides, his prevenient grace, the grace that goes ahead. He's leading us. We aren't leading him. And we can't box him in. We can't kind of say, hey, God, do what we want you to do. We have to do what he wants to do, and he's setting the course. And in Advent, everybody's surprised, right? Because instead of a king coming the way that they expected, we have a baby being born to become king. And so there's surprises along the way. That's what I got. What did you get out of this passage? I think for me, I really want to make sure that I'm not asking God to bless my plans. I want to be a part of what he's doing this Christmas season. So, hey, you guys take care, grace and peace. And by the way, tonight we're doing a webinar at 6:30, and we're going to be talking about this intersection Bible study method and how it works, and some best practices that we've developed along the way, and maybe it's something that you guys could do in your churches. If you're a part of Sandy Hook, maybe you just want to attend and kind of dig a little bit deeper and understand maybe some of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. It's going to be a good webinar tonight from 6:30 to 7:30. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Grace and peace.